Hi everyone, Mikali here, and today I will be introducing a new format to you all. The format being called Cosplay Analysis Breakdown Design Cosplay Breakdown. Working title. I am going to figure out how I want to call these videos once I get to editing, but for now it's like something with these words, I guess. So what is this format about? Well, as the name suggests, I'm taking a design, a character design, whatever, and I'm breaking it down. As in, I will analyze the design and make my preparations for a cosplay with suggestions and things like that. So it's gonna be split into 3 different chapters, depending on how well I understand YouTube. I might even be able to make them visible here in this thingy, but I don't know yet. We'll figure this out. So basically, what I want to do is, first thing is gonna be making a reference sheet, a mood board, a reference board, or however you want to call it, in which I gather like different references as well as sources of the character and put them together to make like one big reference piece. I do this anyway because for judging you always want to have a good front, side and back view as well as some detail shots, and this is basically going to be like the basis of the whole cosplay. So the next thing, chapter 2, would be the design breakdown itself. So this is gonna be me sketching out and designing the character as well as writing down a list with all the items needed, all the parts that make up this cosplay. So you can already see this kinda back here with Ya and Miko. I do this with all my cosplays. So I basically draw the character with my reference board visible, and then just kinda go from there. I draw all the layers, I draw all the pieces needed, and simultaneously write down a list explaining exactly what pieces I need and go in there. So basically I have like the sketch and then the list, and once I have like done the shoes or the wig or whatever, I can just cross this off and nothing gets forgotten. And if you ever do a pack list, by the way, this is super nice. If you have a pack list for a convention, you can just use like this list that you wrote for the making of the cosplay anyway. So this is also going to include underlayers or undergarments that you might not even see in the reference itself, but know has to be there. For example, if you're making a ball gown, you probably need a crinoline or like a petticoat underneath, even if you don't see it from the most outer layer, but there would be a separate piece on the drawing and on the list. Again, this is just like things you know have to be there even if you don't see them just from reference alone, from the outside reference alone. And the last part, the chapter number 3, is going to be a material guide / help and tips and what I think would work really well for these things. Now usually this is just going to be reserved for fabric things, simply because armor is usually always done with either foam or warbler or things like that. But fabric is a lot more diverse and a huge thing that you have to figure out what you want to make for what kind of cosplay. So, I'm super excited to do this. If you also want to see your next cosplay here or just a character you find interesting, be sure to drop a comment down below. Let me know, and maybe even give this a like so that I know that this format is appreciated and fun for you as well. And now let's get on with the video. Usually looking for references is pretty straightforward. For me personally, it's really important to use official sources for my references, especially if I want to later compete in that cosplay in a cosplay competition, because you want to be as close to the official design as you possibly can. Now, how do you get official sources? Well, the easiest thing for Firekeeper is to go and look for in-game files. So some games do have a camera mode Dark Souls does not, unfortunately. But other options are like taking screenshots, loading up the game. Unfortunately, I do not have Dark Souls 3 on my PC. So I do have to make do with just Googling Dark Souls 3 Firekeeper in-game. And then checking out what comes up and using these as references. Same goes if you're like watching an anime, you can take screenshots of the anime or otherwise just Google it. To make my reference board, I always use Canva. I just think, I'm not sponsored by them by the way, it's just really easy to work with, and it's really nice to have like another option to Google Word, which kinda hates you if you try to move a picture, and I don't have that problem with Canva. Plus, it's free to use, unlike like Photoshop where you have to pay Adobe. So, I part my mood board, as you can see here, in different categories. I always have the main reference category, which is again front, side, and back view, as well as the details, which will come later. I am also using this sitting photo because you can see the side view of the Firekeeper. So, otherwise, if you really don't find any good sources just when Googling, if it's maybe super niche, or I don't know, maybe there's just so much fan art that you don't get to the official things, is always to go to your fandom wiki. Now, every fandom I've ever encountered, no matter how small, does have one of these fandom wikis. And they have a lot of photos and official resources, screenshots, concept arts, all that. And the fandom wikis are always free to use. So, an alternative Google search is also the turnaround search, which sometimes brings up like a 3D model, front, back, view, and turn around. That's really nice if that works. There's also some sites for some characters, where you can look at the 3D model, but I will tell you all about that if we ever get a cosplay where I can use one of these sites. So, the next thing is the details tab. Here you can also use concept art, because often concept art has undergarment views or details on specific things, like you can see here with the Firekeeper mask. But I'm not only looking for the mask per se, I'm also especially looking for the necklace and the pendant, because in the official photos we have, they are so tiny and small you can barely see them or make out like the pattern and how they look. Right, I also want to check the hairdo again, because it's a bit inconsistent between concept art and in-game and other references and stuff like that. By the way, pre-styled wigs or cosplays from big stores like Doki Doki or whatever are usually really, really close to the original, or use original references to make their cosplays so they can sell them at the price that they sell them, because they're like super mega accurate. Lastly, for characters that have very little 3D views, you can also look for figures. I also do that for details. Some games also don't have 3D views, and they're only 2D sprites or whatever. And then you might find a figure or an android that could help you figure out what the other dimensions look like. That's what I did for my shelter cosplay, for example. I just googled like figures and found some back views, because her sprite is only her front view painted, and that's it. The last thing I was looking up was the shoes, because I did not find any sources of 3D models or what have you, not even figures that you could put off her skirt or whatever that show her footwear. And unfortunately, since this is a FromSoft game, and they're infamously freaks, especially you, Miyazaki, if you ever watch this, she's probably barefoot. And I'm not doing that, so I gotta figure out another option besides going with the dogs out. I'm not gonna do that. But that's probably what the Firekeeper is doing. So anyway, as you can see, finishing touches, color picking. I make these little squares and pick the colors from the different clothing pieces. It's pretty practical to cross-reference when shopping materials. Sadly, Firekeeper has boring colors. It's all just gray and black and, wow, the leather's brown, I guess. But overall, her colors really don't make or break the design. If it's dark, it's gonna be fine. There are, of course, other designs, again, that rely heavily on the colors and not on other key identifiers, like here with the mask and the dress. So I think we have our little reference board ready to go, and now we can go ahead and do my favorite part of this all, which is breaking the actual design down and making lists. Now, when I'm doing that, I always like to have my reference board in front of me, as you can see here. And then I'm just gonna take out my figurine, which is also front, back, and side view. And I just start sketching. And I'm working myself up from the very top to the very bottom. And simultaneously, while sketching, I'm also writing down each piece. So you can see I've drawn the mask. Now I've drawn the hair and the wig. So now our list says mask and wig. And this is gonna continue for a while. Now, I'm just gonna have this play very, very fast until there's something that I might additionally want to tell you. So, the cape does have a hood. She doesn't wear it, but you can see that the way the fabric forwards in the front, that this cape does have a hood. And you can also see it in the back view and side view that it is a hooded cape. And that it's slightly shorter in the front than in the back. And in the back it has this kind of triangle shape. So yeah, but we are coming to the back later. I always sketch out the front first, because it's the most prominent part. The front is the most prominent part, and I want to get every detail and every seam line I can see on it. I'm also scribbling down the lace placement here, and so on and so forth. So I think we're finished with the front. I kinda like the way the sketch came out, and we're gonna move to the back. Now here, for example, we can see with our references that the crown may go all the way around the head, but in the back there's actually this strand of hair that covers the center back of the mask. And I'm sketching the breakdown here now. Again, this doesn't need to be perfect. Obviously my sketch isn't perfect either. But it's just like a guideline and really helps me that I don't forget, like, oh right, there's this strand of hair that I have to push the mask underneath of. So I have my list. Now I cross-reference it again by drawing the back. And here you can see me draw the hood that I've been talking about. And also making sure that I add the bias tape or the edging or whatever you want to call. And then sketching down the hood. And now on the back you can see it is a lot better than the front. There's actually this kind of blanket thing underneath the cape. The cape isn't just one long piece, but it's like a cape, and underneath there's another cape. So we have the cape with the hood, and we have the long cape. Now the way I just wrote it down for myself so that I remember it is I called it cape with hood and then the blanket over the back. Because it's basically just a straight piece of fabric that's probably attached somewhere on the shoulders. So yeah, the blanket kinda covers the entire back, and the hood lies on top of that blanket. And last but not least, we come to the side view. Now what I usually like to do for the side view is to draw the more underlayer. That I'm actually not drawing the cape this time. This time I am focusing solely on the dress. So in some references while googling around, I found out that there may or may not be puff sleeves underneath. It would make sense given the kind of medieval vibes of Dark Souls. So I'm giving her these half puffed sleeves. And the shirt that she wears under her dress. Now I'm just gonna make it one dress and kinda just push this shirt part underneath. But yeah, I'm not drawing the cape here. I'm just trying to figure out how the dress underneath looks. I didn't actually find any official sources for that because she's never without her cape and you can't like look underneath the cape if you try to like peek from underneath upside. You don't see her sleeves. But it does make sense given the silhouette that there's like a little bit of volume on the sleeves, as well as, again, this medieval fantasy thing. It does make sense, so I'm giving her puff sleeves. I'm also adding some notes on how I want to make the underskirt, because there's basically this dress part which ends with the lace, and underneath there's a separated skirt. That's actually something you can see if you have the Firekeeper armor set, that the dress, the robe, is something different than the skirt. And here we have the final finished product of my sketchy sketch. Again, this is really just to help me and be a reminder, but it's gonna help us with the material guide now as well. I am also going to start at the top, just like I did with the drawing itself, and I'll start with the mask. Now, I think the easiest way to do this mask is by using EVA foam for the base, and then using foam clay to kind of sculpt these shapes in the mask to give this a flowy and natural look. I think foam clay is the best option for sculpting because it's easy to work with and it's very lightweight, and you don't want to carry like a 5-kilogram mask on your head all day. We can make a closure in the back, maybe with some push buttons, maybe with Velcro. Probably not Velcro because it is just right at the hair and it might get stuck in the hair. So maybe push buttons, or maybe even something like an elastic in the back for the part that goes underneath the wig. The wig going for a platinum blonde or maybe a champagne blonde long wig. Always go for the longer wig because it's easier to cut away than to add length. Then we come to the cape with hood. Now, from the looks of it and the fact that, again, it is a medieval game, aesthetic-wise, is I would go for wool or a wool blend. Now, as you can see here, I do have some pictures of what I'm talking about exactly. And I think a black wool, maybe a boucle with a little bit of structure, would look very nice and make a lot of sense, since it would work with the medieval theming. It makes sense for a cape because it's warm, and I get it if it's too hot for a convention or to wear. So I'm also suggesting wool cotton mix or wool, linen mix. Then the dress itself, I would use velvet. I think it looks kind of shimmery. In some pictures you can kind of see that it's like not fur, but it has a fuzzy texture to it, and it's very shiny, and I think that really signifies this velvet structure for me. Also, again, velvet is a fabric that fits this fantasy medieval vibe, especially because it looks very regal and very expensive. It's like kind of like fitting to a maiden, to a priestess of sorts, to give her this fancy, nice fabric. So another part of the dress, because I'm making it in one piece because I think it would just be too hot to add another layer, is this gray kind of undershirt. Now, you can kind of see it at the top here with the turtleneck. So to make this comfortable and again not too hot, I am just doing like a fake collar and shirt that I'll just put in the other dress. And for this I would just use jersey, a pretty single knit, for example, a single knit jersey that looks a little bit nice and fancy in like this melange color. For the pendant, I figured I'd just go with some black rope, some maybe twisted rope or braided rope, because it does not look like just one straight line, but if you just go for like a cord or a twisted rope, I think that would be fine. Then for the belt, I would use pleather. Pleather is fake leather, it's faux leather basically. To give it more stability, you could also cut it out of EVA foam and cover the foam in pleather. Now, as alternative to pleather and leather, I also had this really fun idea of using webbing. Now, webbing is usually something you use for bags and stuff like that, but I think it might actually work as a belt as well. The arm wraps, or however you want to call these glove-like things, I would use pleather, brown pleather, and cut strips out of it. Now we're almost done. The second last thing is the skirt. Now the skirt does look like a different material than the main dress and the coat and all of that things. And it looks a lot more shiny. It looks less fuzzy, but shiny. Which is why I would suggest satin. Specifically cotton satin, because again, it just makes sense to use cotton and not something like polyester. It also looks more elegant and it's heavier. Alternatively, you could also go for a Duchess satin, basically the same thing, or a cotton twill. If you feel like this shininess and this glam that satin has is too much for you, I think a heavy fabric would look nice. So yeah, that's basically it. Again, the last thing on my list would be the back cover blanket, but that's just the same fabric as the cape. So again, same thing. I would suggest using wool or cotton wool blend. I hope this was informative, and maybe if you ever do Firekeeper, you can come back and look at this video. And if not, again, please leave a comment if you have a cosplay in mind that you would like to get this treatment. Until next time, bye bye!